I was driving for DoorDash on the weekend to make some extra money. I worked a day job, so I could only start driving later in the night. When I started, it was a little past 9. I got my first order and dropped it off, then drove back to where the restaurants were. I drove in circles for a while, maybe 10 minutes without getting a single order. It was late, but on the weekends there would usually still be a decent amount of orders. Finally, one popped up and I accepted it though. It was a small order with a small tip after that one. I waited in a parking lot for almost 20 minutes before the next order came through. Obviously this wasn't ideal, having to wait so long between orders, and not even getting to choose which orders to accept unless I wanted to wait even longer. This order was another small one, but some money was better than none, so I accepted it. I picked up their bag from Taco Bell and counted the items to make sure it was right. 2 tacos and some packets of hot sauce. That was it. The delivery fee was probably more expensive than the food. I confirmed that I picked up the order, then got the directions to the house. It was 10 minutes away in some regular neighborhood. A few minutes into the drive, I pulled up to a red light. There was almost nobody on the road at this time of night. So I was just sitting at this empty intersection, waiting for it to turn green. When a truck pulled up next to me, I unconsciously looked over slightly, but the man in the truck caught my attention enough to make me turn my head fully. He was sticking his head out of the window and looking down into my car. Not at me, but at my passenger seat, which had the DoorDash bag in it. I looked back and saw the light was green, so I pressed on the gas. I had no idea why he was looking in my car, but he made it very obvious and didn't even try to hide it. I checked my mirrors, and the truck was now in my lane, cruising a good distance behind me as I continued driving along my route. The truck stayed behind me, but I couldn't say for sure if he was following me or not, because the route was straight all the way until the neighborhood. When I turned in, I stared at my mirrors, waiting anxiously for the truck to pass the entrance. But after 10 seconds, he turned in behind me. There was a chance he just lived here, and I knew that. But after seeing him looking in my car, I felt like I was justified in my suspicions. The route had me go down a few turns in the neighborhood before taking me down to the last road with the address on it. I turned, and right away I saw the dead end sign, a few houses down. I braked and pulled over, staring at my rearview mirror. The truck pulled in behind me and parked as I waited in my car, trying to come up with a plan. The truck behind me was just sitting there with its headlights on. Then I got a text. It was from the DoorDash customer asking when the delivery would be arriving. This was all coming together, and I realized that the man in the truck, likely my customer, was waiting for me to get out of my car. Even though I knew what was going on, I still had no way of getting out of it. After a minute of me panicking to figure an escape, the man got out of his truck. He walked down to my car but stopped right by the trunk. I watched in my mirror as he stood there looking at me through the back windshield. It was a tense moment, making my head panic with thoughts. Then all of a sudden, he slammed something into the windshield, shattering it. I put the car in drive and floored it, just as the man jumped onto the back and tried to crawl in through the broken glass. He fell off as I made a tight U-turn, and with the time it took for him to get up, I was able to carefully maneuver between his truck without any more damage. I saw him wobble across the street as I left and called 911. When police got there, all they found were the broken shards of glass laying in the road. I'm very thankful to have made it out with nothing but a broken windshield, but that night had me shaken up for months. I just hope he's not out there trying to trap more people and do who knows what to them. I'm an Uber driver, mainly working in a large suburb outside Las Vegas. The city is a bit sketchy sometimes, but this suburb is known for being a nicer area, so I never found myself worrying too much. Sure, I'd get some weird people sometimes, but they were usually just drunk, high or otherwise intoxicated in some way. I'd worked for a few months with no issues, and found myself actually enjoying the job on this night. I was working around my usual time between 6 and 10 p.m. It was one of those nights where I was getting a lot of people and making a lot of money. When 10 o'clock came around, I chose to keep grinding out these pickups and make as much as I could the very next order. After 10 was from someone 18 minutes away at an undefined location. This wasn't out of the ordinary. It usually just meant they were on the side of a road somewhere or outside of some place that wasn't on the map. I zoomed in and saw it was right next to a storage garage. I began the drive, and when I was 5 minutes away, I got a call from the customer. "I'm gonna be late. I need you to wait a few minutes for me." "Thanks," he said quickly. While breathing heavily, like he just ran a mile, the man hung up right after. I can't say I'd ever had someone tell me that they were gonna be late, but I didn't mind waiting a few minutes. I knew if I canceled it, then he'd have to wait another 10 to 20 minutes for a new driver to get there. And I was hoping that by waiting, he'd give me a little extra tip money when I arrived. I didn't see anyone outside, so I pulled in and parked in the storage garage parking lot. I waited for 5 minutes. Then I saw a man in my mirror. He was walking quickly out of the storage building holding a large duffel bag. When he got my car, a nasty odor came from him. I also saw that he was dripping in sweat, and it was really gross. I'd picked up people from the gym before, so this wasn't too terrible, but I never made for a good experience. I tried to not make a face and greeted him. The man said nothing, so I got back on the road during the ride. The man held the duffel bag on his lap and stared forward without speaking a word. It made me feel uncomfortable, so I didn't speak either. After a 20-minute drive of awkwardness, I finally got to the destination. It was a corner of a street. Not an address, for I could even shift into park. The man hurried out and started walking away after all that. I wasn't expecting any sort of tip, which was a disappointment. And enough so to get me to call it quits for the night. During my drive home, I noticed that smell never left my car. Even when I tried rolling the windows down, it was so bad that I had to pull over and check to see if he had left something in the back seat. I opened the door and immediately saw some red spots on the seat. I'm no expert, but it looked like blood. Called the police. And after some looking, they confirmed that it was, and there was a lot of it. We tried to track the Uber account, and the next day they even contacted the storage unit but had no luck with identifying the man after thinking back on all of it. Though I'm sure that guy did something terrible just a minute before I picked him up. I mean, he was sweating and carrying a duffel bag with blood soaked into it, and on top of all that, he used fake accounts with both Uber and the storage unit. It really showed me that even in a place that's considered to be nice and safe, there's still terrible people doing terrible things. I took a week off from Uber, then got back to it, but I'm way more cautious about who I'm picking up. I'm a truck driver for a moving company on the East Coast. We specialize in cross-country moving, typically moving people to the far West Coast, which can take anywhere from 20 to 40 hours depending on the locations. I only did the driving for the company, not any of the boxing or loading, so the actual job was 100 just driving and picking up or dropping off the trailer at the houses. I'd been working with this company for almost 4 years at the time. This job was like every other. I got to the pickup address and loaded up the trailer full of the customer's belongings. This was a 30-hour drive in total, which I would do with 2 to 3 short rest stops. The hardest states to drive through are in the Midwest, specifically Iowa and Nebraska. There's absolutely nothing there. It's just dead roads with endless fields of grass beside them. It makes for a very boring and therefore tiring drive. As I passed through the Iowa border into Nebraska, the sun had just set and died. Been on the road for about 20 hours. I took a short break already, a couple states back, but was just about ready for another. My eyes were heavy and I could feel the drowsiness coming in. But a few more miles down, I saw something on the side of the road. A car was stopped off to the side of my lane, with its headlights on. It was a narrow road, so I slowed down to carefully pass. As I did, I noticed the exhaust was steaming, so the car was still running. There was also a man leaning against the driver door and looking right at me. I passed by and gave him a nod, but as I got further down the road, I saw him get back into the car. It was very strange for someone to be sitting on the side of an empty road with a car that still runs. He didn't look like he was in any sort of trouble. He looked like he was waiting. I checked my mirrors often, but the car's headlights disappeared behind me after a few minutes. I was a bit more awake now, but my eyes still felt heavy. Only a mile or so more down the road, I saw another car. This one was sideways, in the middle of the road. And as I got closer, I saw another vehicle on the side. It was a large box fan. I wasn't sure exactly of the situation, but seeing that gave me a bad feeling. I eased into my brakes, but the car stayed in the middle of the road, so I was forced to come to a full stop. I was maybe 20 yards away and could see multiple men standing along the road, and one man in front of the car. I'd have to be the dumbest person in the world to not understand what this was at this point with no better options. I started moving the truck backward. The men stayed where they were with this horrifying confidence. Then a light shined behind me, and a car approached, blocking the way back. A man got out of the car, sprinting at the back of my trailer, and at the same time, all of the men in the front started sprinting at me too. In that instant, my mind went blank, and all of my adrenaline took over. I slammed on the gas as I heard a pop on the back of the trailer, and the doors swung open. The men in front yelled and tried to stand in my way, but once they saw I wasn't stopping, they jumped on the side of the road. I rammed right into the car, knocking it off the road and completely destroying it. A few gunshots sounded in the distance, but none hit. I could hear cargo falling out of the trailer for the next 5 miles before I was able to call the police and to meet an officer on the road. Of course, this was a total mess, but as it all unfolded, it turned out to be much more than just a random attack and robbery. When police arrived at the scene the car had slammed into was left behind, being damaged. Beyond drivable with it, they tracked down one of the members of the attackers who gave up information on the others. They had information on the rich homeowners that were moving and planned to stop me and steal all of the belongings with their box fan. They never said what exactly they would have done to me after they robbed the truck, but I don't think it's a stretch to assume that it would have been a lot easier for them to not leave any loose ends.